"Get out of my restaurant!" The conference room fell silent. 23 employees sat frozen, their faces draining of color as the man they'd mocked just 9 minutes earlier stood at the head of the mahogany table. Marcus Webb wasn't homeless anymore. He never really had been. The restaurant manager, Derek Lawson, felt his throat constrict. The security guard who'd physically pushed Marcus out the door suddenly couldn't meet his gaze, and Patricia Whitmore, the head waitress who'd laughed the loudest, who'd called him trash and vermin, gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. "My name is Marcus Webb," he said, his voice steady but cold as winter steel. "And as of 4:47 p.m. today, I am the new owner of the Belmont Restaurant Group, all 15 locations, including this one." He placed a leather folder on the table. Inside were termination letters. 23 of them. 9 minutes ago, you denied me service. You humiliated me in front of a room full of people. You put your hands on me. You violated every company policy and, more importantly, every principle of human decency. Derek tried to speak. "Sir, we didn't know. You didn't know I was your new boss," Marcus interrupted, his eyes burning with controlled fury. "But that's not why you should have treated me with respect. You should have done it because I'm a human being." He opened the folder slowly, deliberately. "You're all fired effective immediately." The room erupted in protests, pleas, desperate explanations. But Marcus had already turned toward the door. This wasn't just about one moment of cruelty. This was about something much deeper, something that had been building for 7 years, 3 months, and 16 days. And it started with a promise he made to his dying mother in a county hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. 7 years earlier, in the rundown neighborhood of Riverside Heights, a 23-year-old Marcus Webb sat beside his mother's hospital bed, holding her frail hand. Elena Webb had worked 3 jobs her entire adult life: housekeeper at the Belmont Grand Hotel, night shift cook at a diner, weekend cleaner for wealthy families in the Preston Hills district. She'd raised Marcus alone after his father died in a construction accident when Marcus was only 5. Every penny she earned went toward 2 things: keeping their tiny apartment and saving for Marcus's college education. Marcus had graduated top of his class at Riverside High, full scholarship to State University, degree in business administration with a minor in hospitality management. He'd done everything right, worked every angle, fought for every opportunity. But life in Riverside Heights wasn't fair. It never had been. 3 months before his college graduation, Elena collapsed at work. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came too late. The hospital bills came immediately. Marcus dropped out 6 weeks before graduation to care for her. He took a job at a warehouse, loading trucks. Then a second job driving for a delivery service. Then weekend work wherever he could find it. But it wasn't enough. The medical bills devoured everything. The insurance company denied claim after claim, citing technicalities and pre-existing conditions that didn't exist. The hospital threatened collections. The debt collectors called 17 times a day. And through it all, Elena Webb fought. Not for herself. She knew she was dying. She fought to make sure Marcus understood something crucial. "Baby," she whispered one evening, her voice barely audible over the beeping machines. "Promise me something. Anything, Mom. Don't let them make you bitter." Her eyes, once so vibrant, now clouded with pain and medication, still held fierce determination. The people who have power in this world, they forget what it's like to have none. They forget that poor people are people. Marcus felt tears burning his eye. "Mom, save your strength. Listen to me." She squeezed his hand with surprising force. "I worked at the Belmont for 19 years. You know what I learned? The people at the top, they're not better than us. They're not smarter. They just had different chances." She coughed, a terrible rattling sound. Marcus reached for the water cup, helping her take small sips. "The Belmont family," she continued. "Richard Belmont. He inherited everything from his father. Never worked a real day in his life. But he walks through those hotels like he's a king, and he treats people like me like we're invisible." "I know, Mom." "No, baby, you don't." Her grip tightened. 6 months ago, I saw something. In Richard's office. I was cleaning late one night, and he'd left his computer on. There were emails, documents. Marcus, he's been stealing from his own employees. Wage theft, benefits fraud. He's been doing it for years. Marcus leaned closer. What do you mean? The pension fund, the employee healthcare contributions. He's been siphoning money into offshore accounts. Millions of dollars. Money that belongs to people like me. Money that could have paid for. She trailed off. But they both knew what she meant. Her cancer treatment. The medications. The surgeries. I took pictures. Elena whispered. With my phone. I was going to report him. But then she gestured weakly at the hospital room. At her own failing body. I didn't have time to fight that fight. She reached under her pillow with trembling fingers and produced an old smartphone. It's all on here. Every document, every email, everything you need to prove what he's done. She pressed the phone into Marcus's hand. Promise me you'll use it. Not for revenge. For justice. For all the people who can't fight back. Marcus stared at the phone, his mind reeling. Promise me, Elena insisted, her voice gaining unexpected strength. Promise me you'll take him down. All of them. Everyone who thinks they can crush people like us just because we're poor. I promise, Mom. Marcus's voice broke. I swear to you I'll make this right. Elena smiled. The same smile she'd given him every morning before school. Every graduation. Every small victory of his life. You're my miracle, Marcus. You always have been. Now go be someone else's miracle too. She died 3 days later, at 6:22 a.m., on a Tuesday morning, with Marcus holding her hand and singing the lullaby she used to sing to him. The funeral was small. 11 people attended. Marcus spent his last $600 on a simple casket and a plot in the city cemetery. And then, standing alone at her graveside as rain began to fall, Marcus Webb made a decision. He would honor his promise. No matter how long it took, no matter what he had to sacrifice, he would bring down Richard Belmont and expose the entire corrupt system that had killed his mother. But first he needed a plan. What he found was damning, but he was smart enough to know it wasn't enough. The documents showed financial irregularities. Yes, suspicious transfers. Coded language about restructuring employee benefits. But it wasn't ironclad proof. Not the kind that would stand up in court against a billionaire's legal team. He needed more. He needed to get inside the Belmont empire. But how? He was a college dropout with no connections, no money, and no leverage. So Marcus did something extraordinary. He disappeared. He liquidated everything he owned. Sold his mother's furniture, his car, his laptop. He moved out of the apartment and into a shelter. He took every dollar he had, barely $3,000 after paying final bills, and he invested it in a single thing: education. Not traditional education, street education. Marcus spent 6 months living in shelters and on the streets, learning the rhythm of invisibility. He learned which corners were safe, which soup kitchens served warm meals, which churches offered showers. He learned how to be ignored, overlooked, dismissed, because that's what he needed. He needed to become the kind of person that people like Richard Belmont would never see as a threat. But while he lived on the streets by night, by day he was hunting. The city library became his office. 6 hours a day. Every day he studied corporate law, securities fraud, forensic accounting. He used public computers to dig into the Belmont Restaurant Group's corporate structure, their subsidiaries, their shell companies. He found a pattern. Every quarter, the Belmont Group would report strong profits, but their employee benefit programs would mysteriously show budget shortfalls. The money was being moved, hidden, laundered through a complex web of holding companies. Marcus traced the connection. Belmont Restaurant Group owned 15 restaurant locations, but those restaurants were owned by Belmont Hospitality Holdings, which was owned by Belmont Investment Partners, which was owned by Preston Capital Management, which was owned by Grandview Trust, and Grandview Trust that was registered in the Cayman Islands. At the center of this web was Richard Belmont, and beside him, greasing every wheel, was his right-hand man, Victor Ashford, the chief financial officer. But Marcus also discovered something else, something crucial. The Belmont Restaurant Group was structured as a private company. Yes, but 6 years ago, Richard had taken out massive loans using the company as collateral, loans from Preston Capital Bank, loans that were now in technical default because the company was carrying too much hidden debt. If someone could prove the fraud, they could force the company into receivership. The bank would have to call the loans. The company would have to be sold. And if Marcus could be there when it happened, if he could somehow position himself to acquire even a piece of, he could take everything from Richard Belmont. But he needed two things: irrefutable evidence and money, a lot of money. For the evidence, Marcus knew he had to get inside. He needed to work for Belmont, see the operation from the inside, find the paper trail that connected all the pieces. So he did something even bolder. He went back to school, using a fake identity. Marcus had learned how to navigate the underground economy during his months on the streets. He enrolled in an online hospitality management program. He took courses on restaurant operations, food service management, corporate hotel administration. He completed a 2-year certificate in 14 months, studying 8 hours a day in libraries, coffee shops, and homeless shelters. And then he applied for a job, not at the fancy Belmont Grand Hotel where his mother had worked, not at the upscale flagship restaurant. He applied for a night dishwasher position at the smallest, most overlooked Belmont restaurant in the chain, Belmont's Riverside Diner. He got the job, $12 an hour, night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Marcus Webb, who'd graduated top of his class with a business degree, who'd scored in the 99th percentile on every standardized test he'd ever taken, spent the next 2 years washing dishes. But he was also watching, learning, documenting. He befriended the other staff, the cooks who came in hungover, the servers who complained about wage theft, the managers who talked too freely about corporate memos and policy changes. He learned that the Belmont Group had a pattern of hiring undocumented workers, paying them below minimum wage, and threatening deportation if they complained. He learned about the systematic underreporting of hours, the forced unpaid overtime, the managers who pocketed cash tips meant for staff. He documented everything: names, dates, amounts, testimonials. At night, after his shifts, Marcus would go to the 24-hour library and type up detailed reports. He created spreadsheets. He built timelines. He collected evidence, like a prosecutor building a case, because that's exactly what he was doing. But the money problem remained. To acquire the company when it went into receivership, he'd need capital, serious capital, millions of dollars. That's when Marcus met James. James was a 63-year-old venture capitalist who'd made his fortune in tech startups before retiring early. He spent his Tuesday mornings volunteering at the homeless shelter, where Marcus sometimes stayed. Most volunteers at the shelter treated the residents with pity or discomfort. James treated them like people. He'd sit and play chess with whoever wanted a game. He'd have real conversations. One Tuesday, he sat across from Marcus at the chessboard. "You're different," James said, moving his knight. "How so?" Marcus countered with his bishop. "You're here, but you're not stuck here. You're planning something." Marcus looked up sharply. James smiled. "Relax. I'm not interrogating you. I'm just observant." He nodded toward the worn library books sticking out of Marcus's backpack. Advanced corporate finance. Not typical shelter reading material. Marcus made his decision in that moment. A calculated risk. "Can I tell you a story?" he asked. For the next hour, as they played 3 games of chess, James won 2, Marcus won 1. Marcus told him everything: his mother, the evidence, the plan, the years of preparation. When he finished, James sat back and studied him. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" James asked. "Someone crazy enough to think he can take down a billionaire?" "No, I see someone who already has. You just haven't finished yet." James leaned forward. "I made my money betting on people everyone else overlooked. That's my talent, seeing potential where others see problems." He pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. "When you're ready, when you have the evidence locked down and you're ready to make your move, call me. I'll back you." "I don't have anything to offer as collateral," Marcus said. "Yes, you do. You have integrity, determination, and 7 years of proof that you won't quit." James stood, placing his chess pieces back in the box. The question isn't whether you can do this, Mark. The question is when. That was 3 years into Marcus's plan. The next 4 years were a masterclass in patience and precision. Marcus worked his way up in the company, from dishwasher to prep cook, from prep cook to line cook, from line cook to assistant manager. Every promotion gave him more access, more information, more pieces of the puzzle. He built relationships with employees across all 15 Belmont locations. He created a network of people who trusted him, who confided in him, who showed him where the bodies were buried. He learned that Richard Belmont was more than just a wage thief. He was running a sophisticated operation of fraud and exploitation, using immigrant workers as essentially indentured servants, bribing health inspectors, falsifying tax documents, stealing from his own investors. But Marcus also learned Richard's weakness, his ego. Richard Belmont believed he was untouchable. He believed the poor and working class were beneath him. He believed money and power made him immune to consequences. That arrogance would be his downfall. In year 6 of the plan, Marcus finally found what he'd been searching for, the smoking gun. Victor Ashford, the CFO, was sloppy when drunk, and Marcus, now a trusted assistant manager at the flagship location, was there the night Victor had too many scotches at the bar. After a board meeting, Victor's briefcase was sitting on the bar stool beside him. When Victor stumbled to the bathroom, Marcus had 90 seconds. He didn't steal anything. He didn't need to. He just needed photos. Inside the briefcase were hard copies of the real financial statement, the ones that showed exactly where the money went. Account numbers, transfer dates, names of the offshore entities receiving the stolen funds. Marcus used his phone, a burner, untraceable, and photographed every page. When Victor returned, Marcus was serving another customer, invisible and unremarkable. That night, Marcus met with James Chen for the first time in 3 years. "I have everything," Marcus said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "Enough to bury him, enough to force the company into receivership, enough to send him to prison." James plugged the drive into his laptop. His expression grew more serious as he scrolled through the documents. Marcus, this is incredible. You've built a federal case. The question is, will you back me? When the company goes under, when the assets go up for sale, will you help me buy it?" James closed the laptop and looked at Marcus with something like awe. "How much do you think you'll need?" "Conservative estimate, 40 million. The company's underwater with debt, but the real estate alone is worth twice that. Someone with cash could steal it in receivership. And what will you do with it once you own it?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Run it the way it should have been run from the beginning. Pay people fairly. Treat them with dignity. Make it a model for what a company can be when it actually values its workers." James smiled. "I'll do better than back you. I'll partner with you. You bring the evidence and the moral clarity. I'll bring the money and the business connections. We'll split ownership. Deal?" Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Hope. "Deal." They shook hands. "There's one more thing," James said. "Before we blow this wide open, before we file with the SEC and the Department of Labor, you need to test him." "Test who?" "Richard Belmont. You need to give him one final chance to show who he really is. On camera, in public, in a way that leaves no doubt about his character." Marcus frowned. "Why?" "Because when this goes to court, when it hits the media, his lawyers will try to paint him as a misunderstood businessman who made mistakes. They'll humanize him, make him sympathetic." James leaned forward. "But if you can show the world who he really is, how he treats people when he thinks no one important is watching, you won't just win the legal battle, you'll win the moral one." Marcus understood. "You want me to catch him being exactly who he's always. I want you to give him enough rope to hang himself, and I want it on video." Marcus thought about his mother, about her dying words, about the promise he'd made. "I know exactly how to do it," he said. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus knew that Richard Belmont ate lunch at the flagship Belmont Grand Restaurant every Thursday at 1 p.m. Same table, same time, same routine. He also knew that Richard had a phobia about homeless people. Marcus had heard the stories from staff, how Richard would have security immediately remove any homeless person who came within 50 feet of his properties, how he'd once forced a shelter to relocate because it was lowering property values. So Marcus would give him exactly what he feared. But there was another layer to the plan. Something James had discovered through his network of wealthy contacts. The Belmont Restaurant Group was about to be audited by the SEC. An anonymous tip, one that Marcus and James had carefully orchestrated, had triggered an investigation into the company's finances. Richard didn't know it yet, but he had about 90 days before federal investigators would descend on his company with search warrants and subpoenas. But here was the brilliant part. In 90 days, the Belmont Restaurant Group was also scheduled to close on a massive deal. Richard was selling a 30% stake in the company to an international investment group for $2. That money would have given him the liquidity to cover up the fraud, to shuffle funds around, to make the books look clean before investigators dug too deep. If the deal fell through, if the buyers got cold feet because of bad publicity or questions about Richard's character, he'd be exposed, and the company would collapse into receivership. That's where Marcus's plan came in. Marcus knew that the International Investment Group had representatives in town, conducting final due diligence before closing the deal. They'd be watching Richard carefully, evaluating not just his numbers but his leadership and reputation. So Marcus scheduled his confrontation for a Thursday afternoon when those representatives would be dining at the restaurant. The stage was set. 2 weeks before the planned confrontation, Marcus stopped shaving. He stopped cutting his hair. He bought clothes from the thrift store, worn, dirty, oversized. He started sleeping in his car instead of his small apartment. He transformed himself back into the invisible man he'd been 7 years ago. His staff at the Belmont restaurant were confused. "Marcus, are you okay?" they asked. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "Family emergency," he'd say vaguely. "I'll be back soon." He took a leave of absence, unpaid, of course. And then he prepared for the final phase. James Shen hired a private investigator, a former journalist named Sarah Kim, who specialized in exposing corporate corruption. Her job was simple: be at the restaurant with a hidden camera, document everything. Marcus also reached out to his network of former Belmont employees, the ones who'd been exploited, cheated, fired for speaking up. 23 people agreed to be ready to testify when the time came. The Department of Labor was contacted anonymously with a detailed complaint about wage theft, complete with documentation. The SEC was sent an anonymous package containing copies of the financial documents Marcus had photographed from Victor Ashford's briefcase. Preston Capital Bank, the lender that held Belmont's loans, received an anonymous analysis showing the company was technically in default and over-leveraged. Every domino was carefully positioned. All Marcus had to do was push the first one. On Thursday morning, Marcus woke up in his car at 5 a.m. He hadn't slept well. His stomach churned with anticipation and anxiety. This was it. 7 years of planning. 7 years of sacrifice. 7 years of honoring his mother's dying wish. He drove to a 24-hour diner, not a Belmont property, and sat in a corner booth, drinking coffee and rehearsing his moves. At noon, he drove to the Belmont Grand Restaurant and parked 3 blocks away. Sarah Kim was already in position, sitting at a table near the windows with her hidden camera glasses and a backup camera disguised as a phone charger. The international investors were seated in the private dining area, visible through the glass partition, and Richard Belmont's reserved table sat empty, waiting for his 1 p.m. arrival. Marcus checked his watch. 12:47 p.m. He took a deep breath. He thought of his mother, her smile, her strength, her unwavering belief that he could be someone's miracle. "This is for you, Mom," he whispered. Then he got out of the car and walked toward the restaurant, looking every bit like the homeless man Richard Belmont would expect him to be. At 12:58 p.m., Marcus Webb pushed open the ornate glass doors of the Belmont Grand Restaurant. The restaurant was a monument to crystal chandeliers, white marble floors, tables draped in imported Italian linens. The air smelled of expensive wine and fresh-baked bread. And Marcus, in his stained jacket and worn boots, looked like he'd wandered in from another world entirely. The hostess, a young woman named Ashley, who Marcus had once worked alongside at a different location, froze when she saw him. "Sir," she said, her voice uncertain, "can I help you?" Marcus stayed in character. He hunched his shoulders slightly. let his voice crack a little. "I'd like a table for lunch, please." Ashley's eyes darted nervously toward the manager's office. "Sir, do you have a reservation?" "No, ma'am, but I saw the sign outside says walk-ins welcome." Behind him, several diners had stopped eating, staring, whispering. "Sir, I'm not sure," Ashley began. That's when Derek Lawson emerged from the back. Derek was the restaurant manager, a man in his 40s with slicked back hair and a permanent expression of disdain. Marcus had researched Derek thoroughly. He'd been with Belmont for 8 years. He'd been cited multiple times for discriminatory behavior towards staff. He was exactly the kind of person Richard Belmont liked to promote. Cruel, sycophantic, and utterly lacking in empathy. "Ashley, step aside," Derek said smoothly, approaching Marcus with the practiced calm of someone about to remove a problem. "Sir, I'm afraid you can't be here. I'd just like some lunch," Marcus said, keeping his voice humble. "I have money. I can pay." Derek's smile was ice. "This is a private establishment. We reserve the right to refuse service." "But the sign," Derek interrupted, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper, "doesn't apply to people like you. You need to leave." Now, around them, the restaurant had gone completely silent. Every diner, every staff member, was watching. Perfect, Marcus thought. "I'm not causing any trouble," Marcus said, louder now so everyone could hear. "I just want to eat. I'm a human being. You deserve nothing." Derek's mask slipped, revealing the ugliness beneath. "You're a vagrant. You're making my customers uncomfortable. You're dirty and you smell and you need to get out before I call the police." Marcus saw Ashley wince, saw a few diners looking away, uncomfortable but silent, and then Richard Belmont walked in. Richard was everything Marcus remembered from his mother's descriptions. Tall, tan, perfectly groomed. His suit probably cost more than Marcus had spent on rent in the past year. He wore a Rolex that caught the light. He was also on his phone, barely paying attention to his surroundings, until Derek called out to him. "Mr. Belmont." "Sir, I apologize. We have a situation." Richard looked up, saw Marcus, and his expression transformed into pure revulsion. "What is that doing in my restaurant?" Richard said, not even directing the question to Marcus, but speaking about him like he was an object. "I was just removing him, sir," Derek said quickly. "I want to buy lunch," Marcus said again, this time looking directly at Richard. "I have money. I'm not asking for charity." Richard's lip curled. "People like you are what's wrong with this city. You expect handouts. You expect the world to take care of you. You're lazy. You're dirty and you're probably on drugs." Marcus felt his heart pounding, but he kept his voice steady. "You don't know anything about me. I know enough. I know you're standing in my restaurant, ruining the atmosphere for my paying customers, and I want you gone." Richard turned to Derek. "Call security. Have him removed. And if he resists, call the police. I want him arrested for trespassing." "Sir, I'm willing to pay. I don't want your money," Richard snapped. "I don't want your kind anywhere near my business. You are a stain on this city, and you will leave now." That's when Patricia Whitmore, the head waitress, chimed in. She'd been watching from the service station, and she walked over with an expression of theatrical disgust. "Mr. Belmont is being generous even talking to you," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "If it were up to me, I'd have thrown you out the second you walked in. You're trapped, vermin. Go back to whatever bridge you crawled out from under." A few of the staff laughed. Actually laughed. Marcus looked around the room, at the diners who wouldn't meet his eyes, at the staff who were either laughing or looking away, at Ashley, who had tears in her eyes but said nothing, and at Sarah Kim, sitting at her corner table, her camera glasses recording every second. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said quietly. "The only mistake," Richard said, pulling out his phone, "would be allowing you to stay 1 second longer." 2 security guards appeared, large men in black uniforms with radios clipped to their belts. "Escort him out," Richard ordered. "Use force if necessary." The guards approached Marcus. One of them grabbed his arm roughly. "I'll leave," Marcus said, "but you're going to regret this." "The only thing I'll regret," Richard said, smiling coldly, "is that I wasted 5 minutes of my life on someone as worthless as you. Patricia laughed. Derek smirked. The security guards pushed Marcus toward the door. As he stumbled out onto the sidewalk, Marcus heard Richard's voice behind him. And someone get a cleaning crew in here. I want everything sanitized where that person was standing. The doors closed behind Marcus. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, his heart racing, his hands shaking, not from fear or humiliation, but from the adrenaline of knowing what came next. He walked around the corner, climbed into his car, and pulled out his phone. One text message to James Chen. It's done. He took the bait. Another text to Sarah Kim. Tell me you got everything. Her response came immediately. Every word, every face, crystal clear. This is going to destroy him. Marcus checked his watch. 1:07 p.m. 9 minutes had passed since he walked into the restaurant. In 9 minutes, Richard Belmont had exposed exactly who he was to a room full of witnesses and a hidden camera. Now came the reckoning. Marcus changed clothes in his car, pulling out a garment bag that held a perfectly tailored three-piece suit, Italian shoes, a silk tie. He used wet wipes to clean his face, ran a comb through his hair, put in contact lenses to replace the glasses he'd been wearing. When he looked in the mirror, Marcus Webb, the homeless man, was gone. In his place was Marcus Webb, the businessman, the prosecutor, the angel of vengeance his mother had asked him to become. He drove back to the restaurant, parked in the front lot this time, walked through those same glass doors at once. Ashley looked up from the hostess stand and literally gasped. Table for one, Marcus said calmly. And please tell Mr. Lawson and Mr. Belmont that the new owner would like to speak with them immediately. Ashley's face went white. The new owner? That's correct. And gather all the staff. Conference room. 5 minutes. This is not optional. He walked past her, through the restaurant, noting the stares of confused diners, and directly to the private conference room, where he knew management meetings were held. He opened his briefcase and began laying out documents on the table. Termination letters, 23 of them. Legal documents from Preston Capital Bank, showing the transfer of ownership of the Belmont Restaurant Group to a new holding company, Webb Chan Hospitality LLC. A letter from the SEC confirming the federal investigation into Richard Belmont for securities fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement. A letter from the Department of Labor detailing the wage theft claims filed by 47 employees across all Belmont locations. And finally, a tablet computer cued to the video Sarah Kim had captured just minutes before. By the time the staff began filing in, confused, nervous, whispering among themselves, Marcus was ready. Derek entered first, still smirking, not understand. Look, whoever you are, sit down, Mr. Lawson. Something in Marcus's voice made Derek obey. Patricia came in next, followed by the 2 security guards, the kitchen manager, the bartender, the remaining waitstaff, 23 people in total. The exact number of employees who'd been working when Marcus walked in 9 minutes ago. And finally, Richard Belmont himself, his phone still in hand, his expression annoyed. What the hell is going on? Richard demanded. Derek, why are we all? He stopped when he saw Marcus. For a moment, confusion flickered across his face, then recognition, then disbelief. You, Richard said slowly. Me, Marcus confirmed. He placed his hands flat on the table and looked around the room. My name is Marcus Webb. The silence in the conference room was absolute. Marcus let it stretch, watching the faces around the table as realization slowly dawned. Derek Lawson's smirk had vanished. Patricia Whitmore had gone pale. The security guards shifted uncomfortably, and Richard Belmont stared at Marcus like he was looking at a ghost. My name is Marcus Webb, Marcus repeated. And as of 4:47 p.m. today, approximately 4 hours ago, I became the new owner of the Belmont Restaurant Group. All 15 locations, including this one. Richard found his voice. That's impossible. This company is private. It's not for sale. It wasn't for sale, Marcus interrupted. Until Preston Capital Bank called your loans due this morning. You defaulted 3 months ago, Rich. You just didn't know it yet, because you were too busy stealing from your employees to pay attention to your actual debt obligations. He slid a document across the table. Richard's hands trembled as he picked it up. That's the receivership order. Federal court, signed this morning by Judge Martinez. Your company was insolvent. The bank had to seize assets. Those assets went to auction at 4 p.m. today. I bought them, all of them, for $42 million cash. Richard's face turned crimson. You're lying. This is fraud. I'll have my lawyers. Your lawyers are currently very busy, Marcus said calmly, because at 9 a.m. this morning, the SEC and the Department of Labor executed search warrants on your corporate offices, your personal homes, and your offshore accounts. He placed another document on the table. Richard didn't touch it. That's a summary of the evidence against you. 7 years of documentation, employee testimonies, financial records, emails, wire transfer confirmation, everything needed to prove you've been systematically stealing from your workers, evading taxes, and defrauding investors. Marcus looked around the table at the shocked faces. Some of you knew about this. Some of you participated. Some of you just looked the other way. His gaze landed on Derek, and some of you made it your personal mission to make life miserable for the people who work under you. Derek Lawson tried to speak. Mr. Webb, sir, I was just following company policy. Company policy. Marcus's voice was ice. Show me the company policy that says you should call a human being vermin. Show me where it says you should laugh when someone asks for basic dignity. He turned to the tablet and pressed play. The video filled the screen, crystal clear. Every word, every sneer, every moment of cruelty from just minutes before. The room watched in horror, as Richard Belmont called Marcus worthless, as Patricia Whitmore called him trash, as Derek ordered him thrown out, as the security guards laid hands on him, as the entire staff either participated or stood silently by. When the video ended, Marcus let the silence return. 9 minutes ago, you all had a choice, he said quietly. A homeless man walked into your restaurant, a human being who was hungry, who had money to pay, who asked politely for service, and every single person in this room failed that test. Patricia tried to defend herself. We didn't know who you were. Exactly. Marcus cut her off, his voice sharp. You didn't know. I could have been anyone. I could have been a veteran, a victim of circumstance, someone who'd lost everything through no fault of their own. But you didn't care about any of that. You saw someone poor, someone vulnerable, and you decided they didn't deserve basic human decency. He stood, walking slowly around the table. My mother worked for the Belmont Company for 19 years. Elena Webb. Some of you might remember her. She cleaned your offices. She cooked your food. She scrubbed your toilets at 2 a.m. while you were home sleeping in your comfortable beds. Ashley, the hostess, gasped. Elena, you're Elena's son? Marcus nodded. She died 7 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She couldn't afford treatment because this company, he pointed at Richard, stole her health care benefits, stole her pension, stole her dignity. Tears were running down Ashley's face now. I remember her. She was so kind to me when I started. She taught me. She was kind to everyone, Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly before he caught himself. Even when this company treated her like she was invisible. Even when people like Richard walked past her without acknowledgement. Even when she was dying. He returned to the head of the table and placed his hands on the folder of termination letters. Before she died, my mother made me promise something. She asked me to fight for the people who couldn't fight for themselves. She asked me to expose the corruption in this company. She asked me to make sure no one else would suffer the way she did. He looked directly at Richard. 7 years. That's how long it took me to honor that promise. 7 years of working in your restaurants. 7 years of documenting your crime. 7 years of building the case that just destroyed your empire. Richard's face had gone from crimson to gray. You set me up. This whole thing was a test, Marcus confirmed. One you failed spectacularly. Because, see Richard, I didn't need today's video to bring you down. I already had everything I needed. The SEC already had the evidence. The Department of Labor already had the testimonies. The bank already knew you were insolvent. He leaned forward. But I wanted the world to see who you really are. Not the philanthropist who throws charity galas. Not the businessman who smiles for cameras. The real Richard Belmont. The one who sees poor people as less than human. The one who uses words like worthless and vermin and stain to describe anyone who doesn't have money. Marcus straightened and picked up the stack of termination letters. These are effective immediately. Each of you is fired for violating the former company's code of conduct, which explicitly prohibits discrimination, harassment, and failure to provide service based on a person's appearance or perceived socioeconomic status. Derek stood abruptly. You can't do this. I have rights. I'll sue. Sue with what money? Marcus asked calmly. You've been skimming cash tips for 3 years. I have documentation. You're about to be criminally charged. I'd worry more about staying out of prison than about unemployment. Derek sat back down heavily. Patricia raised a shaking hand. Please. I have 3 kids. I need this job. You should have thought of that, Marcus said, his voice not unkind, but firm, before you called another human being vermin, before you laughed at someone's suffering. Your children deserve a better role model than what you showed them today. He looked around the room, one more time. Some of you are wondering if I'm being too harsh, if this is about revenge. It's not. He paused. This is about accountability. For 7 years, you've all worked in a system that rewarded cruelty and punished compassion, a system where bullying the vulnerable was not only accepted, but encouraged. He tapped the termination letters. That system ends today. This company will be rebuilt from the ground up, with fair wages, with real benefits, with respect for every employee, regardless of their position, with zero tolerance for discrimination in any form. Marcus picked up one final document from his briefcase. This is the new employee handbook for Web-Chen Hospitality. It's being implemented across all 15 locations effective tomorrow morning. Every current employee who wasn't in this room today will have the opportunity to continue their employment under the new structure, with immediate raises, restored benefits, and back pay for stolen wages. He looked at Ashley, who was still crying silently. Miss Ashley, I remember you. You were kind to my mother. You're going to be promoted to assistant manager at this location, with a salary increase of 40%. You'll also be enrolled in our new management training program. Ashley looked up in shock. Thank you. I'm so sorry about Elena. I'm so sorry about today. You didn't participate in what happened today, Marcus said gently. You looked uncomfortable, but you were afraid to speak up. I understand that. That's what happens in toxic systems. Good people stay silent because they're afraid of losing their jobs, their security. That fear ends today. He turned back to the terminated employee. As for all of you, you'll receive 1 week's severance, which is more than you're legally entitled to and more than you showed any compassion toward others. Use it wisely, and use this as a lesson. Richard finally found his voice again, and it was filled with venom. You self-righteous hypocrite. You think you're some kind of hero? You lied. You manipulated. You set an elaborate trap. I gave you a test. Marcus corrected. I gave you the opportunity to show basic human kindness. You chose cruelty. That's on you. Not. This isn't over. Richard hissed. I have powerful friends, lawyers, connections, and I have the law. Marcus said simply. The SEC has frozen your assets. The Department of Labor has filed criminal charges. Preston Capital Bank has seized your collateral. Your powerful friends are currently being interviewed by federal investigators about their own involvement in your schemes. He gathered his documents. Oh, and one more thing. That $200 million deal with the International Investment Group, the one that was supposed to close next month, they pulled out this afternoon. Seems they don't want to be associated with someone who just went viral calling a homeless man worthless and a stain on society. Richard's face crumbled. What do you mean viral? Marcus allowed himself a small smile. That video I just showed you, it was live-streamed to 4 different news outlets and posted on social media. It currently has about 2 million views and climbing. You're trending, Richard. Congratulations. The color drained entirely from Richard's face. By tomorrow morning, you'll be the face of everything people hate about wealth and privilege. By next week, you'll be in federal court facing charges that carry a minimum of 15 years in prison. By next year, you'll be bankrupt and forgotten. Marcus picked up his briefcase and walked toward the door. Security will escort you all from the premises.
You have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings. After that, you're trespassing. As he reached the door, he paused and looked back one final time. My mother used to say that the true measure of a person is how they treat those who can do nothing for them. You all failed that measure today. I hope you learn from it. He opened the door, and 2 new security guards, ones he'd hired just that morning, stepped in. Gentlemen, please escort these individuals out. They're no longer employed here. Marcus walked out of the conference room, through the restaurant where the remaining staff had gathered, whispering urgently about what was happening, and out into the late afternoon sunlight. James Chen was waiting by his car, grinning broadly. I watched the live stream, James said. Marcus, I have no words. You were magnificent. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 7 years finally lifting from his shoulders. It's not over yet, he said. We have 15 restaurants to transform, hundreds of employees to take care of, a whole system to rebuild. I know, James said, and we'll do it together. But right now, just for a moment, let yourself feel this. You won. Not just over Richard Belmont, but over a system that tried to crush you, over poverty, over injustice. You won, Marcus. Marcus looked back at the restaurant, his restaurant now. He thought of his mother, of her strength, of her faith in him. No, he said quietly. We won, Mom and me. She started this fight. I just finished it.
5 years later, the Webb Chen Hospitality Group had become a model for the industry. The 15 former Belmont restaurants had been completely transformed. Fair wages, well above minimum wage, comprehensive benefits, profit-sharing educational programs, career advancement, opportunities, zero-tolerance policies for discrimination and harassment. But more than that, they'd become something else: hope. Every restaurant employed formerly homeless individuals, giving them not just jobs but pathways to stability. The company partnered with shelters and job training programs. They provided temporary housing assistance. They understood that people needed more than just a paycheck. They needed dignity and opportunity. The financial results were remarkable. Turnover dropped by 80%. Productivity increased by 45%. Customer satisfaction ratings soared. The restaurants that Richard Belmont had run through exploitation and cruelty were now thriving through compassion and fairness. Marcus Webb, now 35 years old, stood in the lobby of the newly renovated flagship location, renamed Elena's Kitchen in honor of his mother, watching the lunch rush. The restaurant was beautiful, still upscale, still elegant, but now there was warmth to it, laughter, light. Behind the host stand, Ashley, now the general manager, greeted guests with genuine warmth. In the kitchen, several employees who'd once been homeless were working as line cooks, having completed the company's culinary training program. At the tables, servers who were being paid fair wages and treated with respect provided service that came from genuine pride in their work. She would have loved this, said a voice beside him. Marcus turned to see James Chen, his business partner and friend. She would have, Marcus agreed. She always believed people were capable of more than the world gave them credit for. James nodded toward the large portrait on the wall, Elena Webb smiling in her housekeeper's uniform. The foundation is doing incredible work too, James said, referring to the Elena Webb Foundation they'd established to provide healthcare assistance to working poor families. We've helped over 2,000 families with medical expenses this year alone. It's not enough, Marcus said. It's never enough, but it's something. The front door opened, and a man walked in. He was wearing clean but worn clothes. He held himself with the careful dignity of someone who'd known hardship. Ashley greeted him warmly. Welcome to Elena's Kitchen. Table for one. Yes, please, the man said, his voice uncertain. I just got a job nearby. This is my first week. I wanted to try somewhere nice. Congratulations on the new job, Ashley said genuinely. Right this way. As the man was seated, Marcus watched him look around the restaurant with wonder, the same way Marcus had once looked at places he thought were beyond his reach. Excuse me, Marcus said to James, and walked over to the man's table. Good afternoon, Marcus said. I'm Marcus Webb. I own this restaurant. The man looked up, clearly nervous. Is something wrong? Nothing at all. I just wanted to welcome you personally. What's your name? David, the man said. David Morrison. It's good to meet you, David, and congratulations on your new job, Marcus signaled a server. Lunch is on the house today. Order anything you'd like. We're glad you're here. David's eyes welled up. I thank you. That's very kind. Marcus smiled. We believe everyone deserves a good meal and a warm welcome, no matter where they're coming from or where they're going. Enjoy your lunch. As he walked back to James, Marcus felt a familiar presence, as if his mother was there smiling at him. You okay? James asked. Yeah, Marcus said, just thinking about how different things could have been, how different they are. He brought flowers, Elena's favorites, white lilies, and sat by her grave as the sun set. I kept my promise, Mom, he said quietly. It took 7 years, but I did it. Richard Belmont is in federal prison. He's serving 18 years for fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. Victor Ashford testified against him to reduce his own sentence. The whole corrupt system came down. He arranged the flowers in the vase. The restaurants are doing well, really well. We're treating people the way you always wished you'd been treated, paying fair wages, respecting their dignity, giving them opportunities. A breeze rustled through the trees. Derek Lawson is working at a car wash now. Can't get hired anywhere in hospitality after that video went viral. Patricia Whitmore moved out of state, trying to escape her reputation. The others, they scattered. Some learned their lesson, some didn't. Marcus traced his fingers over the engraving on the tombstone. Elena Webb, beloved mother, fighter for justice. But here's the thing, Mom. It's not about revenge anymore. It hasn't been for a while. It's about making sure no one else's mother dies because some rich man decided that poor people don't deserve health care. It's about making sure no one else has to choose between dignity and survival. He sat in silence for a long moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I miss you, he said finally. Every day, but I feel you with me, in every decision I make, in every person we help. You're still here, still fighting, still believing in people. Marcus stood, brushing the dirt from his knees. I'll be back next week, same time. I love you, Mom. As he walked back to his car, his phone buzzed. A message from Ashley. Boss, we just had our best Thursday ever, record sales. But more importantly, one of our dishwashers asked if we have any management training slots open. He wants to work his way up. I told him yes. Hope that's okay. Marcus smiled and typed back. More than okay. That's exactly what we're here for. Set up a meeting with him tomorrow. Let's talk about his goals. He climbed into his car, no longer the beat-up sedan he'd lived in during those hard years, but not an ostentatious luxury vehicle either. Something practical, reliable, honest. Before starting the engine, Marcus pulled out a worn photograph from his wallet. It showed him and his mother at his high school graduation, both of them grinning, full of hope for the future. We did it, he whispered to the image. We changed the world, just like you said we could. And so, the story of Marcus Webb reminds us of a fundamental truth. One person, armed with determination and unwavering moral clarity, can take on the most powerful systems and win. Marcus didn't have money. He didn't have connections. He didn't have privilege. But he had something more important. He had integrity. He had purpose. He had a promise to keep. For 7 years, he lived invisibly. He worked thankless jobs. He endured hardship that would have broken most people, but he never gave up. Because he understood that real strength isn't about power or wealth. It's about resilience and commitment to something greater than yourself. The people who denied Marcus entry to that restaurant saw someone they thought was worthless. They saw someone they could dismiss, dehumanize, and discard without consequence. They were wrong. The homeless man they mocked was actually the very force that would dismantle their corrupt empire. The person they underestimated was the one who held their fate in his hand. And when the moment came, Marcus didn't just seek revenge. He sought justice. He didn't just want to destroy his enemies. He wanted to build something better in their place. That's the difference between revenge and righteousness. Revenge is about making yourself feel powerful. Righteousness is about making the world more just. Today, hundreds of families have health care. Because of Marcus's foundation, dozens of formerly homeless individuals have careers and stability because of his restaurant. Thousands of workers are being paid fairly and treated with dignity because one man refused to accept that the system was unchangeable. But here's the most important part.
Marcus Webb isn't unique. There's nothing he did that you couldn't do. Maybe you won't take down a corrupt billionaire. Maybe you won't buy a restaurant chain or start a foundation. But you can stand up for someone who's being mistreated. You can speak up when you see injustice. You can treat the person everyone else ignores with kindness and respect. You can be someone's miracle. The world is full of people like Richard Belmont. People who've convinced themselves that money and power make them better than everyone else. People who've forgotten that we're all human beings deserving of dignity. But the world is also full of people like Elena Webb. People who work 3 jobs to give their children a chance. People who remain kind even when life is cruel to them. People who believe in a better future even when the present is painful. And the world desperately needs more people like Marcus Webb. People who refuse to accept injustice. People who fight for those who can't fight for themselves. People who understand that true strength comes not from crushing others, but from lifting them up. So here's my question for you. What promise are you willing to keep? What injustice are you willing to fight? What system are you willing to challenge? You don't need 7 years. You don't need millions of dollars. You don't need a complicated plan. You just need to start today. Right now. Stand up for someone. Speak truth to power. Choose compassion over cruelty. Be the person who sees the humanity in others, especially when everyone else looks away. Because here's the truth that Richard Belmont learned too late. The people you underestimate are often the ones who will change the world. The homeless man you ignore today might be the force that transforms your industry tomorrow. The struggling single mother you dismiss might raise the child who cures cancer. The person you mock for being poor might be the one who exposes your corruption. Never underestimate anyone. Never forget that we're all connected. And never ever lose sight of the fact that how you treat people, especially those who can do nothing for you, defines who you really are. If this story moved you, if Marcus's journey inspired you, if you believe in a world where justice can triumph over corruption, then I ask you to do 3 things. First, like this video, help it reach more people, help it inspire more people to stand up against injustice. Second, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear this message, someone who's fighting their own battle, someone who feels powerless and needs to be reminded that change is possible. And third, subscribe to this channel, because we're going to keep telling these stories. Stories of underdogs who refuse to quit. Stories of justice triumphing over corruption. Stories that remind us all that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. But most importantly, go out and write your own story. Find your cause. Keep your promise. Fight your fight. Be someone's Marcus Webb. Be someone's miracle. The world is waiting for you.